welcome back to another edition of the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Football Podcast, sports podcast, where I basically talk about why I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s to today. Last night was the first game of the NFL season. Good game. Surprising outcome as Detroit went into the defending champions' home and edged Kansas City 21-20. I find it fascinating that the NFL decided over these last years, decade maybe, to start a season on a Thursday night to give usually a championship team a night for its coronation, its celebration, its pomp, its circumstance, everything to look great in recognition of their achievement of a year ago. And I find it funny because sometimes, just like college, the team that won the championship comes back the next year and they don't come back with the same players. Because of free agency, a lot of players have moved on to different teams. Some players have retired. Some players are injured. The Chiefs have a player that was injured in their tight end, Mr. Kelsey, and they have a defensive end who was a top 5 defensive player at his position in the league. And so they sat out last night. But in my opinion, did it hurt the game for the Chiefs? It did somewhat because they didn't really get a lot of pressure on Jared Goff. And also, the receivers of the Chiefs dropped some passes. I think that comes with not practicing in the preseason. I think that comes with just not being prepared mentally for a game. But basically, the reason why I prefer the 80s and 90s sports over that and over the opening night Thursday thing, do we really need a celebration to celebrate the team that won the championship the previous year? Because of what I said earlier, which was not every team comes back intact. 2 years in a row now, the Rams came back. They played Buffalo opening night last year. And Buffalo beat the Rams. The Rams were the defending champs. Buffalo beat them. The Rams did not have all of their players back, as Odell Beckham Jr. didn't play because of injury. None of the running backs really who contributed to their season last year were a factor. And some of the defensive linemen were gone. And so it technically wasn't the same team. And so in a lot of ways, when they do this sort of special Thursday night game, what are they really celebrating? Are they basically taking advantage of the fact that Major League Baseball didn't have a full schedule last night, and so they're taking advantage of having the ability to play on a Thursday night when they know they're going to have the audience? College football had a game last night, but it wasn't a major game or a game that pit teams that are ranked or in power conferences. So what's the big deal about Thursday night? Thursday night has its own slot all season long. Some weeks they're going to be good games. Some weeks they're not. But the NFL doesn't care whether they're good or not because they just schedule games. They assume that players, teams, coaches will all sort of replicate what happened the previous year. And as we all know, that's just not how it works all of the time. I mean, I remember there was one Thursday night football year where Peyton Manning and the Colts, or Peyton Manning when he became a Bronco, actually played. And I think he threw 7 touchdown passes in the game. But we've seen Aaron Rodgers throw 6 in a game. I mean, the point is, we don't know. And that's the whole thing with my whole beef with college football. with their ranking system this early? You just don't know, because not every team is coming back with the same studs that made them great. And then what topped it off last night was Mike Tirico saying that this game should have an asterisk because the Chiefs didn't have Jones and didn't have Kelsey. Well, why should it be having an asterisk? NFL teams are injured all of the time. There's 17 weeks in a season. All the teams will have at least one injury before tomorrow, even before the season starts. Teams have injuries. So why is the game needed an asterisk? That rubbed me the wrong way. Mike Tirico knows better saying that. I mean, that's like having a basketball announcer, a baseball announcer, which there are, and NFL announcers that is pro a particular team, which there are, and doing that for his or her pro team. Not a national broadcaster. A national broadcaster is supposed to be unbiased. I mean, Mike Tirico, I believe, is from Michigan. So shouldn't he be saying more positive things about Detroit than Kansas City? That's why I didn't like Liam McHugh when he was doing the studio with NBC, and even doing some on-site games, because he was so pro Patrick Mahomes that it was like, dude, we know he's good, but he's just in the right situation in the right time. That's it. He throws the ball hard like Elway and Favre. Throws it far like Elway and Favre. And he plays a lot like Favre. And he plays a lot like Aaron Rodgers. But that's it. Let it go. And just listening to the game last night, I don't know if you watch NBA basketball, but Mark Jackson does this thing when a player is on fire, and it's usually a Golden State player because he helped build that roster. Usually it's Steph Curry or Klay Thompson. If they're making a bunch of shots in a row, he says, "Mama, there goes that man again." And he seems to only do it for Golden State players, maybe Kevin Durant, maybe Luka, but that's it. He doesn't do it for every player. And last night, to hear Mike Tirico, of all people, sound biased towards Kansas City, I was so glad they lost. Because he shouldn't have been biased towards the Chiefs. He should have been biased towards the Lions, because in a lot of ways that was a statement win. But it's only one game out of 17. But back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, opening day was cool. Everybody played. You had a Sunday night game, you had a Monday night game. We move on. NFL is trying so hard to get into everybody's conscience that they are, was it Verizon has a phone plan now? You get a Verizon phone, you get the NFL ticket for free. That's free advertising for Verizon. I mean, I'm not saying that is dumb. I'm just saying that that's what they're trying to do. And I prefer the NFL to be played on Sundays. In December, they can play on Saturdays. On Thanksgiving, they can play on Thursday. But that's it. I'm a diehard football fan. My team is the New York Giants, and they play across the country. So I like football. But trying to turn football into an event bigger than it is, trying to take advantage of things that football is allowed to take advantage of because of the other sports not fully grasping their roles. I can't fight that. But I will say, unfortunately, I will watch. Sunday's week 1. Let's see what happens. Giants.